looking at the Radiola 60, as you can see here. I'm in a little different venue and using a different recorder. Outside, taking advantage of the nice 80-some degree weather and nice bright sun here in Ohio while it happens. Figure it'd be a good place. I want to check in here, make sure I'm not bringing in any creepy crawlies or furries. So I'm going to pull the chassis, both of them, and give a cursory look over things and see how it's going. I've learned some tips online from watching some video series of a restoration of a Radiola 18, which mechanically is kind of similar, electronically very different, and I've seen some very good tips on how to get everything apart, so I'm going to use that to my advantage here and take everything as it comes. And got my old screwdriver, pliers, some bags for the screws, and big old cups to throw everything in as I take it out. And giving a quick look, it's in pretty decent shape here. And I'm going to try some quick restoring on the cabinet, not today, but going to try the normal tip is to use Gojo hand cleaner, and to try and use that to get the nasties off. So first, we're going to set this down, and if you hear me grunt or anything, because sometimes I'll be trying to wrestle this around with one hand, and this radio does weigh almost 50 pounds, and quite big and heavy. Now I'm going to use a tip that I was told, which is to try to get these knobs off. As you can see, I was able to get the knobs off. The knob for the tuning condenser is pretty good shape. The one for the volume rheostat's a little rusty. I will clean that up. Now I'm going to take these escutcheons off so that nothing gets damaged, and also take the power switch off, and so that we don't lose anything before I take anything out. Okay, if you hear any noise next door, that's my neighbors doing a little cleanup and moving some wood. I'd rather deal with the little noise than the cramped space downstairs and possibly letting out creepy crawlies or whatever downstairs. I'm going to continue to get this scutcheon off of the power switch. It was not on there all that tight. Looks really good condition, and this is walnut, and probably old growth walnut. I will be replacing these screws are kind of nasty. All the screws are quite rusty. I'm going to keep them, but I am going to replace them with brass screws. Probably using a bit too big of a screwdriver here. I'm trying to be a little careful. I don't really want to damage this escutcheon. It is a little different on the RCA than the others, because I've seen on the Brunswick 5KR, which is the Radiola 18, it's not one piece, and this part that deflects the light here for the dial light is actually a separate part that can get lost. I mean, that's a pretty nice, piece of brass. It's a little dirty, and don't know if I'm going to clean it up. Well, we'll clean it. I don't know if I'm going to get it to where it'll look like new. But you can see it's RCA Radiola 16 super heterodyne, which is the what this radio is, which is just like all standard radios today are super heterodyne, invented by Edwin Howard Armstrong. Vastly increased the sensitivity of all radios when he developed it. Also improved the sound quality a have been told that even though this has only like a half a watt of output, the sound quality can be quite impressive, especially if you hook it to a modern speaker. Set that to the side and work on this last one here. So as you can see, all in all, the cabinet is in fairly good shape. A couple nicks and dings here and there. First thing I'm going to try is to go over it with a little Gojo hand cleaner, which I've been told actually works quite well to clean these up. And then we'll see what happens. It looks like there's a little bit of alligatoring of the finish. It's to be expected after 80 plus years. So I'll flip the radio back over. We're back at the chassis. Going to take this plate off here, which you might not be able to see. Get over the socket power unit a little better. But this plate here covers a terminal strip to connect the socket power unit to the amp and tuner chassis. It also covers the line voltage select switch. This radio is set to work with voltages as low as 105 volts or as high as 125 volts. And in my area, I have about 118 volts. Terminal strip here for reconnecting everything. Get that out here. Of course, I just dropped the screw down in. But I will make notes before I disconnect everything of how it connects to the socket power unit, because that is critical, because each one of these terminals is a different voltage. Looks like the cover did a good job. You know, it's got its little cardboard bit and the metal bit. It's in reasonably good shape. You know, that might clean up really easy. So put that off to the side. And sorry for looking at the top of my head there. So getting it. A little note about the wiring here. Figure it's worth a note. Here you see the voltage select switch, 110, 120. Of course, it's in the 120 position. The manual says do not put it in any other position other than 120 unless you know for a fact that you have voltage less than 110 volts. And a little bit of note about the wiring. Here you will have the speaker connector pins with a little bit of speaker cable. And you may be wondering why there is no top on here. Now, normally there's a top, covers it. Piano hinge here opens up. Apparently this radio had an optional accessory, which was a large cabinet with an electrodynamic speaker. And this radio was set up for that option. So what they did is you take, the cover was removed, the top cover gets removed, and then all the wiring feeds down into the cabinet, hooks up with the speaker connector, the audio output. But also, since it was an electric dynamic with its own power supply and an electromagnet on the speaker, you would need AC power. So this wiring, which goes right to where the power cord is on the socket power unit, is, as far as I can guess, is switched AC power that would then just go down and connect to that speaker. They just cut it off. I'm going to remove this because there's no need for this. What I am going to do, since the speakers for this, the little magnetic speakers that were meant for this, the RCA 100 and 103 were rather expensive and hard to find sometimes. Temporarily, to get everything working, I do have a pair of high impedance headphones that work that I will use. But I'm thinking of fashioning something. Maybe I can find an empty case for a 103 or a 100 speaker. And what I want to do is just put a modern dynamic speaker in there with a matching transformer to bring it down to the 4 or 8 ohms, depending on which speaker I choose. I haven't decided that yet. Still got a lot to go before then. So I'm going to continue on this. I'm going to flip it over, take the bolts out, and get the chassis off so that we can go from that point. Alright, got the power distro block, for lack of a better term, taken care of and disconnected. What I am going to do right now is to take these screws out. What I do want to do is, flip the power supply over. I have removed the 80 rectifier because I don't want it to fall and break my only 80 rectifier tube. And I'm going to take the chassis bolts out here. Hopefully they will come out without too much of a problem. And I can slide the chassis out. What I want to do is get rid of this, first of all. This is an asbestos insulator, fire protection. I do not want that in here. I don't want anything to do with this, so that'll be the first thing I work and get rid of. So I could power unit out. This is the little bit of nastiness I was talking about. Probably asbestos. Best gotten rid of, which is where it's going to go right now. No creepy crawlies yet. No real nasties. Couple little things in there. That should clean out rather easily. Chassis is much lighter without the power unit. And here is the aforementioned socket power unit. Everything here relatively simple. Let's look underneath. Sometimes these power resistors can be a problem, and on this piece of nastiness I had seen this, and I was hoping against all hope that that was not wax leaking out of the potted transformer and filter chokes and everything. Doesn't look like it is. Looks like that was just some glue. I'm going to go throw that in the circular file right now before it gets any worse and can cause any more damage. As I suspected from taking a quick look, let's see, this is the power switch, and then we have some old friction tape that goes to here as well as here. So we get this one old nasty wire here. Well, actually these wires aren't too nasty. They've actually been protected quite well. In fact, all of these wires, because of that nasty piece of asbestos that I did just get rid of, they did protect everything quite well. In fact, you can even see probably you can even see that the colors on the wires were preserved pretty well. And this is actually a good thing because it does make a difference. The wires, of course, but in the service literature that I have, which is right now just the Beatman's manual for this service manual, it does give you color combinations and what, where they go, where they're supposed to be. I am going to check some of these wire round resistors because they are known to go bad. Usually they go open. I'm going to check these dog bones to see what they read. I have approximately what they should be. The fun thing about some of the service literature is a lot of this stuff, there's no component values. which does make for some interesting servicing. But we would have to just kind of check, and of course I do want to check the power transformer itself to make sure it's not bad, because that would be a stop to this whole project. I got the tuner chassis out. It does look like something spent a little time in here munching on some wiring, which could get interesting. And I'm picking out all this so we don't have to deal with it later. But other than that, of course I could make things a little interesting, but it looks pretty much like it's never really been worked on. I don't see any obvious signs of anything really bad, which is a great thing for something this old. With the getting the nasties out, I'm going to throw it away. Yeah, definitely whatever was in here ate a couple wires. This will definitely need to be replaced, but otherwise everything looks in pretty good shape. Solder connections are actually quite clean, and you know, like this capacitor block here, I'm going to recap it anyway. These are probably the two, since this is just a single cap, I can trace that, but it's probably going to be one of the 2 microfarad caps that are in here. And same with this, they're wax capacitors, kind of. They're different than the older, later construction of wax capacitors. Use different materials than normal ones from the 50s, 60s, you know, like the infamous Philco bumblebees, were just normal paper and wax. Apparently, the older ones, they use much higher quality paper. It was a rice paper, and very higher quality insulators. But you know, it's looking pretty good. I'm actually going to get the shop vac and blow some of this other junk out while I'm still outside. And the cabinet is in pretty good shape too, just a little dirty. So the cabinet, I do believe, will come up quite nicely. So this is going to be an interesting project. This is definitely the oldest piece of electronics I've ever worked on. So that's it for today's installment, and just the cursory inspection. A lot more to come.